Preparing the mind for Nibbāna by Bhikkhu Kaṭukurunde Ñāṇananda. It is being narrated by Bhikkhu Candana. Preparing the mind for Nibbāna. On this day of Vaisakha, earth is bathed in the soothing light of the full moon. We may think nostalgically of the hallowed sal tree grove in Lumbini, where Prince Siddhartha was born on a Vaisakha day. We also think of the Bodhi tree on the bank of Neranjara river, where the Buddha attained enlightenment, and the sal grove in Kusinara, where the Blessed One attained Parinibbāna. All these things happened on the full moon day in the month of Vaisakha. Since that time, this Vaisakha full moon has shed its light upon the earth for over 25 centuries. It reminds us of a story in the Buddha's dispensation. On a certain occasion, the Blessed One said, "Meritorious bhikkhus, there are places where no sun or moon throws light. They are in deep darkness. There are such places near us." Then a bhikkhu asked the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, the Fortunate One, is there a place in this world without sun, without moon, thus shrouded in terrifying darkness?" "Yes, bhikkhus, there is such a dark place. That is the mind that has not understood the Four Noble Truths," said the Supreme Buddha, from the Anthakara Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya. A long journey. We do not know the length of the journey we made through the series of rebirths. We do not know the oceans of tears we shed in our sorrows. We do not know the winds of despairing sighs we have made in our lamentations. If we were to write our aspirations during our sojourns in the series of rebirths, the surface of the earth will not suffice to place the pages. We may have been born in the world of Devas or of Brahmas or on earth. We may never know how many times we were reborn in the four hells. Many people have no fear of sojourning in a series of rebirths. They may not have any particular fear of a rebirth in hell. However, all fear suffering and punishment. Greatest truths of this world. Very rare indeed is the birth of a Buddha. He shows us the truth. We learn about this truth in his dispensation. There is a reality we must understand. The Four Noble Truths is that reality. As long as the Four Noble Truths remain obscure to us, we will be destined to make a limitless journey through samsara. The Blessed One said, "Bhikkhus, the Four Noble Truths are unchanging, and they are absolute realities. That is why they are called the Noble Truths," from the Tattva Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya. The Four Noble Truths are timeless, and therefore valid for all time. They are rational. Anyone with faith, effort, and wisdom can understand and realize them. There is a defined way to reach the Four Noble Truths. That is, the Eightfold Noble Path. The first of its 8 parts is right view. The others are right thought, right speech, right bodily action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. One must walk this path to become free from the series of rebirths. Stream enterer and personality belief. The way to Nibbāna consists of 4 stages. In the first stage, one must be established in the right view and learn about the 4 Noble Truths. One must understand them in depth. One must meditate and contemplate the 4 Noble Truths. One will gain the wisdom of the truths. Thus, one would become a stream enterer, Sotapanna. This is the first stage of realizing Nibbāna. The wisdom of the truths is the knowledge of the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the extinction of suffering, and the truth of the Eightfold Noble Path leading to the extinction of suffering. A stream enterer has a clear understanding of the truths of suffering. That helps to eliminate personality belief, Sakkaya Ditthi. Life is held together by 5 aggregates. They are known as the 5 groups of existence, or the 5 groups of clinging. They are corporeality, rupa, feeling, vedana, perception, sanya, mental formations, sankhara, and consciousness, vijnana. Corporeality has its origin in the 4 ultimate constituent elements. Feeling, perception, and volition result from sense impression, phassa. Consciousness results from corporeality, rupa, and mentality, nama. The Supreme Buddha identified these 5 aggregates as suffering. The existence of these 5 groups drives one to acquire a personality belief, Sakkaya Ditthi. The life of the stream enterer. A stream enterer has the wisdom to reject any joy arising from the 5 aggregates because he or she understands the reality of the noble truth of suffering. When one understands the truth of suffering, one also understands the remaining noble truths. Then, one's personality belief becomes extinct. One who contemplates the truth of suffering understands how it manifests. One will know that the Buddha's realization is the ultimate truth. One will understand the Buddha's doctrine about suffering. One will understand the life and effort of the noble person, the Buddha, who achieved the fruition of the path. Such a person knows the need to cultivate discipline of bodily action, speech, and mind. Such a person sheds all doubt about the doctrine, delights in observing the precepts of virtue spoken by the Enlightened One, and has discipline of virtue and the faculties. Thus, clinging to mere rules and ritual has no place in his or her life. The noble disciple now has the right view. That will guide him or her through the other phases of the noble path. His vision for the Nibbāna. The stream enterer recognizes thoughts of lust when they arise from wrong contemplation of a sense object. One recognizes also a feeling of hatred arising in oneself, resulting from wrong contemplation of a sense object. One understands that the basis of one's wrong thoughts is unwise consideration of sense objects. One exercises wise consideration over and over again to dispel lust and anger arising from unwise consideration. The major obstacles to wise consideration are the 5 hindrances, the qualities that blind our mental vision. They are sensuous desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, and finally, skeptical doubt. Kama chanda, vyapada, tinhamidha, udhacha, kukucha, and vichikiccha. These 5 hindrances prevent one from understanding the truth, but misguide one to unwholesome deeds. Sense desire diverts one's attention and binds one's mentality with an object of anger or jealousy. Sloth and torpor diminish effort and concentration. Restlessness and remorse shatter the calmness of mind that is needed to direct right thought. Entertaining doubts about the path of meditation and contemplation is skeptical doubt. He can recognize the enemies of his mind. The stream enterer makes continuing effort to overcome the 5 hindrances. One makes every effort to distance oneself from conditions that cause the hindrances. An object of sensuous desire may cause sensuous desire in an instant. As a stream enterer, one recognizes this as a hindrance. One may contemplate upon the loathsomeness of what the physical body comprises, and make effort to dispel sensuous desire. One would contemplate upon the parts that comprise the body. One will know the body consists of the 4 ultimate constituent elements. One will train one's mind to contemplate upon a cadaver, bloating, decomposing, until it becomes a part of the earth. As these contemplations improve in intensity and degree of concentration, the tendency to stray towards objects of sensuous desire will become less. The practice of the meditation of loving kindness will lessen the occurrence of objects of anger. Then one can practice mindfulness of in and out breathing, and also contemplate the impermanence of the 5 groups of clinging. Control the dangerous machine, the mouth. The moment one lets go mindfulness, one may lose control of one's words. When one's mind is trained, one will be mindful whenever one is about to speak an untruth. One will be mindful when one is about to speak harsh words. One will be mindful when one is about to speak meaningless words. At such times, one will summon the strength and discipline not to speak unwholesome words. One may speak the Dhamma or remain silent. As the disciple improves in understanding of the noble path, unwholesome actions caused by unwholesome words will cease altogether. Avoiding unwholesome bodily actions is very important. One way of doing that would be to follow the 5 precepts. A person would make the 5 precepts a guiding factor for his or her actions. One will thus develop abhorrence for unwholesome actions and fear of unwholesome kamma, results. One will cultivate one's mind to refrain from taking life, taking what is not given. One will develop a clean character. One's conduct of life will be righteous. One will delight in one's righteous way of life. The 4 foundations of mindfulness. A person having the right view will thus discipline bodily action and word. One will develop concentration and wisdom. One will become established in the four foundations of mindfulness, contemplating the body in mindfulness, contemplating feeling in mindfulness, contemplating the mind in mindfulness, and contemplating the five groups of clinging, 6 sense bases, and factors of enlightenment in all those contemplations in mindfulness. Contemplation of the body, Kāyanupassana, includes that of in and out breathing, loathsomeness of body, ultimate component elements, and a cadaver dissolving into the earth. All these belong to contemplation of body. The mind is calmed, concentration is established, and the 5 hindrances are removed through these contemplations. The mind develops through the contemplation of feeling, Vedananupassana, being mindful of pleasure, pain, and neutrality. Being mindful of one's thoughts, Cittanupassana, is contemplation of mind. When a thought of sensuous desire arises, one recognizes it as such. When a thought of anger arises, one recognizes it as such. When a thought of delusion arises, one recognizes it as such. When one is stricken by sloth and torpor, one recognizes that. When one enters absorption, one recognizes it as such. When the mind scatters towards external objects, one recognizes that. Conditioning the mind to recognize mental states and effects in this manner is contemplation of mind. Right view, wisdom, effort, concentration, and mind discipline are essential factors in contemplating the mind. As a noble disciple, one now continues to practice contemplation of mind objects, Dhammanupassana. One meditates upon the nature and reality of the 5 groups of clinging, Pancha Upadana Khanda. One understands corporeality, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, so as not to lead one to further rebirth. One would wisely analyze how rebirth occurs due to internal sense bases, such as eye, ear, and nose, and external sense bases, such as eye objects, sound, and smell. In one's contemplation, one understands how one can become free from the series of rebirths. Such a person develops the factors of enlightenment. The Supreme Buddha has taught us 7 such factors. They are mindfulness, investigation of the law of Dhamma, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity, sati, Dhamma Vichaya, Virya, Piti, Passaddhi, Samadhi, and Upekkha. To make oneself ready for the development of the factors of enlightenment, the noble disciple focuses on concentration through mindfulness. Right concentration is the last element in the Eightfold Noble Path. In that context, it is the ability of the mind to remain focused with other elements of the Noble Path. When one is well established in mindfulness, concentration is the natural outcome. The Supreme Buddha defined it further as the 4 meditative absorptions. Thus, the 4 meditative absorptions can only develop through mindfulness. First stage of samadhi, the first jhana. Supposing a person is practicing mindfulness of in and out breathing, The first phase of any meditation is to restrain one's words and body actions by discipline of mind. Next, one contemplates upon thought conception and discursive thinking about an object of meditation. If that object is in and out breathing, one becomes mindful of in and out breathing. If the object is loathsomeness of body, one becomes mindful of the 32 body components. If the object is the 5 groups of clinging, one becomes mindful of corporeality, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. All these meditations require thought conception, discursive thinking, energy, and concentration. As one continues to remain mindful of the selected object of meditation and maintains discursive thinking, the 5 hindrances are gradually overcome, and one keeps focused on the object of meditation only. When the 5 hindrances, namely sensuous desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness, remorse and skeptical doubt, kama chanda, vyapada, tinhamida, uddhacha, kukucha, and vichikicha are overcome, the mind feels a sense of joy, piti, and well-being, sukha. The body relaxes and the mind concentrates. One can sustain concentration for a long period. One's concentration becomes stronger. Then one has acquired thought conception, discursive thinking, joy, a sense of well-being, and concentration. Thus, such a person has entered the first sphere of absorption, Patama jhana. Second stage of samadhi, the second jhana. Having entered the first sphere of absorption, one examines the obstacles one must now clear to strengthen one's absorption. Occasional short distractions of the mind and reverting to the object of meditation is the nature of the first absorption. Thought, conception, and discursive thinking makes the mind meander amongst external objects. One understands this phenomenon and considers it as a setback for strengthening the jhana. Now, one succeeds in focusing on the object of meditation, independent of thought conception and discursive thinking. One's concentration becomes stronger. Thought conception and discursive thinking that initially promoted meditation are now quietened in the presence of the absorption. One's joy now springs from within one's concentration. The joy of absence of thought, conception, and discursive thinking. This is the second absorption. The noble disciple recognizes the factors of the second absorption that are not in the first. Third stage of samadhi, the third jhana. The disciple who has practiced the second absorption then understands that his or her mind is overly influenced by joy. Such a person concentrates to move away from this sense of joy or rapture, piti. One's wisdom becomes keener, and one's mind becomes calmer. Thus, one's mind becomes totally relaxed. One still takes pleasure in the sense of well-being, sukha. One's concentration is robust, and one's mind is calm. This is the third absorption. Fourth stage of samadhi, the fourth jhana. To proceed to the fourth absorption, one must cast aside physical and mental happiness, as well as physical and mental unhappiness. Gradually, one's mind shines forth with clarity and an ethereal quality. one is established in an unshaken concentration and neutral feeling. Then one examines the reality of the 5 groups of clinging. One strengthens the 7 factors of enlightenment, satta bodhanga, mindfulness, investigation of the law of Dhamma, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. Sati, Dhammavichaya, Virya, Piti, Passaddhi, Samadhi, and Upekkha. Then how he practices the mind? Previous experience in the practice of meditation leading up to insight, that is, vidarshana or vipassana, will help a great deal at this stage. Vidarshana is the intuitive realization that exposes the truth of impermanence, suffering, and the non-self and unsubstantial nature of all corporeal and mental phenomena of existence. One will now understand the nature of the 5 groups of clinging, the 4 constituent elements, and the sense bases. One will see them as impermanent, suffering, and non-self. One will focus concentration to realize the 4 noble truths. Developing the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is mindfulness. The first factor of enlightenment, sati sambojjhanga. One fully understands that the 5 groups of clinging are encountered in the contemplation of body, feeling, mind, and mind objects. When one contemplates the 5 groups of clinging as things impermanent, suffering, and non-self, one loses attachment to them. What arises now is the investigation of the law of Dhamma, Dhamma Vichaya Sambojjhanga. A disciple who has reached this stage has the capacity to understand the law of dependent origination, paticca-samuppada. Such a person penetrates the law of cause and effect. He or she knows that effects result from causes, and when causes cease, their results also cease. Such a person makes effort to eliminate unwholesome volitions and accumulate wholesome volitions. Strength and effort to understand the truth is called the energy factor of enlightenment, vidya sambojjhanga. The joy that overwhelms the noble disciple in this stage of development rises from the understanding of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. He or she understands the true nature and reality of that joy. This is the rapture factor of enlightenment, piti sambojjhanga. The rapture that comes with understanding relaxes the body and mind. It dissipates all stress of body and mind. One has gained wisdom. One sees the 5 groups of clinging in one's rapture. This is the tranquility factor of enlightenment, passaddhi sambojjhanga. Then he can see the reality well. Thus, one strengthens tranquility and insight within the 7 factors of enlightenment. One's mind is calm and tranquil. By concentration of mind, one realizes that suffering consists of nothing other than the 5 groups of clinging. Thus, one sees suffering in the 5 groups of clinging. The nature of the mind that does not cling to its state of concentration is one of neutrality. Nevertheless, the disciple remains detached even from a neutral mind. Such a person sees the 5 groups of clinging even in a neutral mind. He or she sees in it impermanence, suffering, and non-self. He realizes the 4 noble truths. The disciple is, thus, well established in mindfulness and the 7 factors of enlightenment. Such a person fully understands the 5 groups of clinging as the truth of suffering. One discards ignorance and craving for the 5 groups of existence with full understanding of the truth of the origin of suffering. He or she gains higher knowledge by vanquishing ignorance, avidya. One gains deliverance by vanquishing craving. Such a person realizes the path to extinction of suffering by practicing virtue, concentration, and wisdom, sila, samadhi, and panya. By this time, the noble disciple is an arahant. Such a one has reached deliverance. Since one has fully realized the 4 noble truths, one is free from defilements. One has knowledge and vision of one's deliverance. That is the wholesome accumulated wisdom of the 4 noble truths. At last, he attained the Nibbāna. One knows one has understood what one should about suffering. One has overcome the origin of suffering. One has successfully traced one's steps along the path and attained Nibbāna. One knows that the cycle of rebirth has ended for oneself. There will be no more suffering in samsara. One followed the path of the Supreme Buddha's dispensation. One has ended the indeterminate journey through foul and fair rebirths. The final fruition of the path is the attainment of Nibbāna. Groups of existence still remain with a person at that stage. When physical death occurs, he or she is in a state of Nibbāna without any residual groups of existence. Anupadise sanibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.